Welcome to another deep dive. This time it takes us beyond that familiar image of Nelson Mandela in the fight against apartheid.
Yeah,
We're going to uncover a whole network of South African freedom fighters today,
yeah,
and honestly, you might be surprised how many names you don't recognize.
right.
We've got articles, transcripts, historical accounts.
Well,
It's going to be quite a journey.
yeah, it's amazing how history so often focuses on, just singular figures
Right.
when movements like this one thrive because of so many people
Yeah.
and each one with their own story.
Exactly.
And that's what we're going to look at today, that human side of resistance.
That's what I'm excited about.
Yeah.
These weren't just people behind bars or, on the front lines.
Yeah.
We're talking everyday people facing down this brutal regime.
Right.
And I think you'll find some of these stories really inspiring.
Oh, absolutely. It's more than a history lesson.
Yeah.
This is about human resilience and what people can do together when they're facing these impossible odds.
Yeah. Okay, let's start with someone who I think deserves way more recognition.
Okay.
Winnie Madikizela Mandela.
Yes.
You know her maybe as Nelson Mandela's wife.
Right.
But in South Africa, she was known as the mother of the nation.
Yes. And it's so important to recognize that while Nelson Mandela was imprisoned, Winnie became a potent symbol of resistance in her own right.
Wow.
She endured 491 days in solitary confinement
Oh my God.
and was subjected to torture.
It's hard to even imagine.
It is. And yet she emerged as this galvanizing force in the movement.
It's incredible. Imagine being banished to a remote town,
Right.
having your home taken away, and you turn that town into a center of activism.
Yeah.
That's exactly what she did. Inspiring the youth, empowering women, all the while constantly harassed by the authorities.
Absolutely. And her impact was felt internationally, too.
Really?
She received the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Award, which really speaks volumes about her influence
Wow.
beyond South Africa's borders.
Her story just totally dismantles this notion that she was simply Mandela's wife.
Yeah,
This was a powerful leader facing immense suffering.
absolutely.
But she never wavered in her fight.
Never.
It makes you think how much we miss when we just focus on, one person.
Mm-hmm.
Her story shows the courage, the resilience of so many individuals involved in the struggle.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just these larger-than-life figures like Wani.
Right.
We see this power of individuals taking action in their own unique ways.
Yeah, and that raises a good question.
What's that?
What are the different faces of resistance?
Oh, that's interesting.
It's not always about being on the front lines.
Right.
Take David Webster, for instance.
Okay.
He was an anthropologist.
Yeah.
And he dedicated his life to amplifying the stories of those suffering under apartheid.
Wow. So his work came at a high price then?
Sadly, it did. He faced incredible risks
Yeah.
and ultimately paid the ultimate price for his activism.
It's a sobering reminder of the dangers.
It is.
And yet there were others who chose different paths of resistance, like Helen Seisman.
Yes.
Can you imagine being the lone voice against apartheid in an all-white parliament?
It's hard to fathom.
For 13 years, she stood up against that opposition,
Oh!
just relentlessly challenging these racist laws.
A remarkable testament to her courage and persistence.
Yeah, it really is.
She didn't back down at all.
No.
And her fight for justice didn't stop there.
Really?
Later, she served on the very commission that oversaw South Africa's first democratic elections.
Wow.
Talk about a fitting culmination to her decades-long fight.
Yeah, it shows you how every action, every voice raised against injustice contributed to this larger movement for change.
Absolutely.
And when you think about the role of youth in this struggle,
Mm-hmm.
it gets even more inspiring.
Yeah.
Take Solomon Malangu, for example.
Okay.
He was just 20 years old when the Soweto uprising forced him out of school.
Wow.
He joined the armed wing of the ANC
Oh, wow.
and tragically was executed for a murder he didn't commit.
Solomon's story is just, it really underscores that tragic injustice of the apartheid system.
Yeah.
A young man full of potential, robbed of his future because of a regime that valued racial hierarchy over human life.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking, and there are so many others like it.
I know.
Ashley Creel,
Yes.
he was dubbed the Che Guevara of Bontehue.
Mhm.
His charisma just jumps off the page when you read about him.
It does.
He also died at just 20, but his impact continues to this day.
It does.
There's even a filmmaker working to bring his story to a wider audience.
That's great.
Ashley's story, like Solomon's, reminds us that age was no barrier to making a difference, even under such circumstances.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that it highlights this ongoing process of historical rediscovery.
Right. Yeah.
These stories are still coming to light,
Yeah.
and new generations continue to be inspired by these freedom
Their
fighters.
bravery is just astonishing, especially when you consider the risks they faced.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about all the individuals whose contributions were crucial, but their stories are less known.
Yes. Often left out of the spotlight.
Exactly.
That's where our deep dive takes us next.
Okay.
Into the lives of those who work behind the scenes, shaping events in subtle yet powerful ways.
I'm intrigued.
Their stories might just challenge everything you thought you knew about this period.
Okay, so here's where it gets really fascinating.
Okay.
We're talking about people like Gower Radbay.
Okay.
He was a man who recognized Nelson Mandela's potential early on and did something extraordinary.
Really?
He actually stepped aside from his own promising career to give Mandela a chance.
It's amazing that seemingly small act had ripple effects.
Yeah.
It paved the way for Mandela to become a lawyer,
Right?
a skill he would use throughout his life to challenge the very legal framework of apartheid.
Wow. It's a reminder that seemingly insignificant choices can have a huge impact
Yeah,
on the course of history.
absolutely.
And speaking of unsung heroes,
Mm-hmm.
that Forgotten Freedom Fighters video
Oh, yeah.
really brought to light the stories of individuals who dedicated their lives to the struggle, but
Yeah.
faced hardship even after liberation.
Their stories are so poignant.
Yeah.
Imagine fighting for freedom your whole life, risking everything only to find yourself
Right.
living in a tin shack after liberation,
It's hard to even imagine.
relying on food handouts just to get by.
Wow.
And yet these individuals clung to the hope of a better future for their nation.
Makes you think about the true cost of this struggle
It does.
and the sacrifices made not just by the iconic figures, but by so many everyday people.
Absolutely.
And when we think about unsung heroes,
Right.
we can't overlook the role women played in the movement.
It goes far beyond that 1956 Women's March.
Yeah.
As powerful a symbol as that was,
Right.
we're talking about women who challenged the system in every sphere of life.
Exactly like Albertina Susulu.
Yes.
She was a nurse who turned her own home into a school, defying that racist Bantu education system.
Now, for those who might not be familiar with it,
Yeah.
the Bantu education system was designed to limit the opportunities available to Black South Africans,
Right.
essentially training them only for menial labor.
Right.
So Albertina, creating a school in her home, was a direct challenge to this system.
Wow, and she didn't stop there.
No, she didn't.
She was the first woman arrested under the 90-day detention law,
Oh, wow.
which allowed the government to detain people without trial for 90 days.
That's incredible.
It highlights her courage.
It shows how women were on the front lines,
Right.
constantly pushing the boundaries,
Yeah.
challenging the very foundations of apartheid.
Yeah, and then we have Lillian Ngoyi,
Yes.
whose gift for public speaking made her a natural leader.
She was.
She rose to prominence in the Women's League and the Federation of South African Women.
That's right.
You might not know this, but August 9th is National Women's Day in South Africa
It is.
because of the march that she co-led in 1956.
That's right. Her legacy lives on in such a tangible way.
It really does. And what's fascinating is that we keep uncovering more and more stories like hers.
Yeah.
You know, the source material mentions figures like Rita Nzenga
Right.
and Frances Bard, women who played pivotal roles, yet their stories are only now being fully recognized.
That's amazing.
Like a whole other layer of this movement is waiting to be explored.
Absolutely. As we broaden our focus,
Yeah.
we'll see that this fight wasn't confined within South Africa's borders.
Right.
It drew in international support. And that raises crucial questions
Like what?
about solidarity and global responsibility.
That's a great point. The fight against apartheid resonated across the world.
It did.
And the global response is a crucial part of the story.
Absolutely.
You know, for a long time, the ANC was actually considered a terrorist organization
Really?
by many Western countries, including the US and the UK.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder of how political contexts, particularly the Cold War, shaped global perceptions.
Right. The ANC's alignment with the Soviet Union made it suspect
Yeah.
in the eyes of the West.
It's a fascinating paradox when you consider that the apartheid regime,
Yeah.
with all its brutality, was seen as an ally in the fight against communism.
Exactly.
It boggles the mind that even Nelson Mandela remained on the U.S. terrorist watch list until 2008.
Wow.
It highlights how powerful propaganda can be
It
in
does.
shaping global narratives.
Absolutely. And that makes the efforts of the international anti-apartheid movement all the more remarkable.
It does.
They faced an uphill battle
Yeah.
against these prevailing narratives,
Right.
but they were relentless in their efforts to shift public opinion.
So what did they do?
They organized boycotts, pushed for sanctions,
Okay.
put immense pressure on governments to
Ah.
isolate the apartheid regime.
And their efforts had a real impact.
They did the Rivonia trial,
Yeah.
where Mandela and other leaders faced the death penalty,
Yeah.
sparked a global outcry.
Yeah.
International pressure played a crucial role in saving their lives.
So it's a clear example of how solidarity wasn't just a sentiment. It had real, tangible consequences.
It did, and it took many forms,
Like what?
from high-profile campaigns to grassroots organizing,
Okay.
cultural boycotts, divestment initiatives. The goal was to raise awareness and make it increasingly costly
Right.
for businesses and governments to support the apartheid regime.
The source material about the British anti-apartheid movement really highlights their tenacity.
Absolutely.
Weekly vigils outside the South African embassy, protests, boycotts, lobbying parliament.
Wow.
They were a constant thorn in the side of the apartheid regime.
Their dedication was remarkable.
It was. Their sustained and strategic activism is a case study in how to build a movement that can exert real pressure on those in power.
Yeah, it was a long game, but it ultimately played a key role in weakening the apartheid regime.
We can't forget the African nations that offered refuge to the ANC
Right.
and its armed wing.
Okay. Kanto, Sizwe.
Yes, thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
They risked a lot to provide that support.
They did these frontline states, as they were called,
Right.
faced constant threats and destabilization campaigns from the apartheid regime.
It's hard to believe.
They were economically vulnerable, yet they stood firm in their commitment to supporting the liberation movements.
Think about it. They were staring down this powerful, hostile neighbor,
Right.
knowing the potential consequences.
Yeah. It must have taken immense courage to stand by their principles.
It must have. And it's important to note
Yes.
that even within this network of support,
Right.
there were complexities and tensions.
Yeah, for example, the relationship between the ANC and Tanzania
Oh, right.
went through a difficult period in the late 1960s.
There were accusations of the ANC being involved in a coup plot,
Right.
leading to their expulsion from Tanzania for a while.
It's a reminder that even within movements,
Yeah.
there can be disagreements and shifting allegiances.
Well, that's messy.
It's a human process.
Exactly. And it's crucial to acknowledge that nuance when we study history.
Absolutely.
It's never a simple, straightforward narrative.
It's-
So we've got this global network of support activists on the ground in South Africa. Right. The ANC operating from exile. How did all of these pieces come together? That's the question. To ultimately dismantle apartheid?
It is. What was the tipping point?
Yeah. That's a complex question.
It is.
And there's no single answer.
No, but what we see is that it was a combination of internal and external pressures
Okay.
that forced the apartheid regime to the negotiating table.
So it wasn't just one event or one person, but a confluence of factors.
Precisely internally, you had the tireless work of activists, trade unions, student movements,
Yeah.
organizations like the United Democratic Front.
Right.
They made apartheid ungovernable from within.
So they were the ones on the ground facing the brutality firsthand,
Yeah,
but never giving up the fight.
never.
Their sacrifices were immense.
They were. And then externally, you had this growing international pressure,
Okay.
the boycotts, divestment campaigns. Sanctions imposed by the UN and various countries started to have a real economic impact.
So they were being squeezed from both sides.
Exactly. And then to add to the pressure, the Cold War came to an end.
Right.
This removed a major source of support for the apartheid regime,
Wow.
leaving them vulnerable to international condemnation.
It really was a perfect storm of events.
In many ways, yes. And it's important to understand
Yeah.
that the transition to democracy wasn't a smooth process.
Right.
There were setbacks, there was violence,
Of course.
and the negotiations were incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
But the combination of all these factors ultimately forced the apartheid regime to concede.
And it's interesting how Zambia played a key role in those negotiations in the late 1980s.
Isn't it fascinating?
Yeah.
Zambia had become a safe haven for the ANC,
Right.
and its relative stability made it a suitable location for talks
Yeah.
aimed at establishing a new South Africa.
There's a certain poetic justice to that.
There is.
A country that had sheltered the movement now playing a part in its ultimate victory.
It highlights the unexpected turns of history
It really does.
and how seemingly small actions can have far-reaching consequences.
Yeah, it really makes you think about how interconnected it all was.
It does.
All these different people and events
Right.
coming together to create this momentous shift in history.
Yeah, amidst all of these complex machinations, there's a more human question that arises.
Okay.
We've seen how the fight against apartheid drew in people from all walks of life,
Right.
across different countries with different backgrounds, different motivations.
Yeah.
What do you think was the common thread that held them together?
That's a question worth pondering.
It is.
It seems like it boils down to a shared belief
Okay.
in the fundamental dignity of all human beings,
That's a good point.
regardless of their race.
Yeah, a belief that the apartheid system with its brutal hierarchy and systematic oppression
Right.
was inherently wrong.
Yes.
That belief transcended political ideologies, national boundaries, personal differences. It was a moral imperative that united people across the globe.
You know, it's interesting because even Sailor Mellon,
Right.
who fought for a colonial power,
Yes.
eventually came to recognize the injustice of apartheid.
You do.
It demonstrates how this shared belief in human equality could bridge even seemingly insurmountable divides.
His story is a powerful reminder
Yeah.
that personal journeys can be complex
Right.
and that our understanding of right and wrong can evolve over time.
It's true. The fight for justice often challenges us
Yeah.
to confront our own preconceptions,
Absolutely.
to grow in our understanding of the world.
It does. So alongside that shared belief in human dignity,
Yeah.
what else do you think kept these individuals going
Right.
through years of struggle, imprisonment, exile, and the constant threat of danger?
Well, I think it was hope. Hope played a crucial role in sustaining this movement.
Absolutely. A deep-seated belief that a better future was possible,
Yeah.
that South Africa could be transformed into a just and equitable society.
A hope that refused to be extinguished even in the darkest of times.
Yes, that hope fueled their resistance and their sacrifices.
Yeah.
It gave them the strength to keep fighting, to keep believing that change was possible.
And often
Yeah.
that hope was intertwined with a profound love for their country.
Right, a longing for a South Africa that belonged to all its people regardless of race.
It's a testament to the human spirit, wouldn't you say?
It is. It reminds us that the human heart has an incredible capacity to dream of a better world, to fight for it, even when the odds seem stacked against us.
Absolutely. And, as we've been exploring this topic,
Yeah.
it struck me how many individuals were involved in the fight against apartheid.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It wasn't just the famous figures.
Right.
It was a massive network of people from all walks of life. Each one played a part.
Yeah.
Each one made a contribution, no matter how big or small.
It really underscores the power of collective action.
It does.
Yeah.
No single individual could have dismantled apartheid.
No, it took the combined efforts of countless people working together,
Yeah.
supporting each other, sharing that common hope,
Right.
and never giving up.
And that's what makes this story so powerful.
It is.
It's not just a story about individual heroes,
Right.
but about the collective spirit of a people
Yeah.
determined to break free from the chains of oppression.
It's a story that reminds us
Yeah.
that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles, change is possible when people unite around a common purpose.
We've journeyed through a lot in this deep dive.
We have.
From personal tales of courage and resilience to the intricate workings of the movement
Right.
and the global ripple effects of the struggle against apartheid.
Yeah, but as we come to a close, I'm left with one final thought.
What's that?
We've seen the stories of those who fought so bravely for freedom in South Africa.
Yes.
But what about the countless individuals whose stories haven't yet been told?
Right. Those whose contributions have been forgotten or overlooked.
Exactly. What can we do
Yeah.
to ensure that their stories are brought to light
Right.
and their sacrifices are not in vain?
That's an essential question.
History is never truly complete. There are always more stories to unearth, more voices to listen to,
Right.
more perspectives to consider.
So where do we even begin?
It starts with nurturing our own curiosity,
Okay.
a willingness to dig deeper, to ask questions, to actively seek out those hidden narratives.
To be receptive.
Yes.
Listening to those voices that have been marginalized or silenced. Giving them a platform to share their experiences.
It's through those efforts
Yeah.
that we not only honor the past,
Right.
but also inspire future generations to continue the fight for justice and equality.
That's beautifully put.
Thank you.
It's a reminder that the fight for justice is an ongoing process.
It is a relay race of sorts.
Yeah.
Passed down from generation to generation.
And on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up our deep dive into the South African freedom struggle.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. It's been a truly incredible journey full of insights and inspiration.
It has.
It's left me with a profound appreciation for the unyielding strength of the human spirit.
Me too.
And I hope it's done the same for you.
It has been a privilege to explore these stories with you. I hope our listeners will be inspired to continue their own exploration of this complex and captivating chapter in human history.
Absolutely. As we move forward, it's vital to remember that the fight for justice continues.
Yes.
And it's up to each of us to carry the torch.
It is.
By learning from the past, we empower ourselves to act for a better future.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thank you.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and never let that spark of curiosity fade.